Hello everybody, hope this finds you well. The nice thing about recording these art gripes is that I can actually do it with my headphones off for once. Usually it's a big problem because it takes, like, your head gets super sweaty whenever you're doing it, like it's pretty weird. And you can't really hear out of one side of your head. Like, it's weird to talk while you can't hear yourself talk. I don't know. Anyways, Android 21. I know some people were looking forward to it, couldn't do it, because I had to spend all of January going through Patreon stuff, which was a big trial. Finally got it done. I guess I'll mention in this video, I believe I'm going to plan on ending Patreon stuff. Certainly by next year. I might do it by the second quarter of this year, just because it's gotten to where it consumes so much time that it's actually preventing me from working. And the purpose of the Patreon was to help me work, so it's not really serving its goal whenever I'm having to dedicate so much time to that. So, just throwing out that there. Alright, to go over this real fast, you can see me go through a whole bunch of primaries, because at first I was like, well, what should I do with her? Should it be like a sexy pose? And then I was like, no, that's too predictable, and that's not really my MO in the first place. And then I had this idea of maybe I should make it like a different kind of creepy. Because it's already going to be creepy. I mean, let's be frank here. So I decided, you know what I enjoy doing? And you guys already know what I'm going to say. I really enjoy making people feel uncomfortable for reasons that they don't understand. And as of the recording of this video, I've actually already uploaded this, the final version of this picture, and I'll get to my reaction to the overall picture later on, but I finally got to, I uploaded that, and, like, there's of course, oh, it looks nice, play, I jerked off, whatever, whatever people say usually, and then I was kind of waiting for it, so like, well, that's fine, and then there was one guy that responded, that was like, I think this is too far. And I was like, yeah, I did it! I did it! That's exactly what I was going for. Alright, here just trying to figure out exactly what I want to do with it. As far as the pose goes, I was thinking, well, the reason why I was doing most of the poses before was I was trying to come up with something that was a little bit more dynamic. But I've stated this before, but anytime that you're doing like a really dynamic pose, you lose the potential of showing off everything you want to show off in terms of, like, if you're doing a strong, like, top-down thing, where it's almost like a fisheye lens or something, you're looking directly down at the character or something like that, for example, then you're only pretty much going to see their face and absolutely nothing else. But a lot of the appeal with 21's design, of course, is the outfit, the general body structure, and everything like that. And I didn't want to lose all that, but at the same time, if you focus too much on the body, you can't focus on the face, and the face is very important in regards to being able to engage with the character, so couldn't really focus on doing that, blah blah blah, you get the idea. So with this, I was, also playing with the idea, her trying to hold someone's hand, whether willingly or not willingly, and it wasn't really working out because it was, in that example, concealing too much of her torso, and it was basically just congesting the image for really no reason. So I decided to get rid of that, and decided, you know what, it does use the tail. The tail's a good way of going with this. So, you can probably get a gist for why I was making the decisions I was making, and most of them are for very uncomfortable, creepy reasons. Of course, yes. So, I'll jump ahead a little bit. I think that this image, the theme of this video is going to be me trying to force myself to do something I don't want to do. And the final version of this image coincides with that. I do a lot of, I didn't record it, but there's like a little 10-minute window where I fixed up some of the face before I started coloring, I think the phase was. So you won't see that, so her facial features will move a little bit. In between those two states, but that comes later on. Right here, I'm just going through like I usually do, doing 2 or 3 different primaries until I feel like, okay, this is where I wanted it to be. But usually with a picture like this, what I would attempt to do is keep the primary, like you're seeing here, because I actually like this sort of sketchy look to things. And probably do some line work, but really try to make sure that I retain as much of the sketchiness as I possibly can. Because this is kind of how my style is developed. In the past, I would say I don't have a style, and I kind of don't. But I sort of do. It's kind of weird. But the more that I work at it, the more I find I'm more comfortable with just sticking with line work. But that doesn't help you improve. Like I've said before, you know, perfect practice is a sort of fallacious way of looking at things. It's not perfect practice, it's variable practice. It's your ability to try different things, to learn new things, to get out of your comfort zone. And, like if you're used to doing nothing but line work, maybe try painting for once. You don't have to paint, like you don't have to go to that all the time now. But it helps you as far as being able to explore new options, open yourself up to new ideas, and so forth and so on. I've been up to this, you guys know. Point being, with this video, and this drawing in particular, that's what I would have done. I would have just done my primary, done a couple of those actually, and then stuck some more solid line work on top of it. Then probably gone back over and do some sort of tertiary, like, stroke and gestural stuff on top of it to give it a little bit more depth. But otherwise just use, like, two-tone, I guess, probably. Probably not tritone if I was doing that much line work. But just basically a single color layer with a little bit of... No, it was, yeah, it was before the color. Do a little bit of... I can't even remember what the hell I was even saying now. But do the line work. With a single color, and then, and then after the single color, just put some shading on top of it, and then that's it. Tritone would be like adding like some light layer or something on top of it. But that's usually what I would have done. In this case, I decided, you know what, I'm going to force myself to try to paint skin, because that's something that I have always had a huge problem with, and it's very difficult. And skipping ahead, I don't think I succeeded in this video. I'm sure that... Nah, I really don't think I did. Actually, in terms of what my overall goal of this picture was, I would actually consider this image to be a failure. And you might be wondering, why are you doing an art gripe on it then? Well, failures are also important. Like, I'm sure that lots of people enjoy this image or whatever, but for me it's a personal failure because my goal was not really reached in a way that I was happy with. But that just opens up an avenue to improve later on, right? Like, there's always room for improvement. I don't really attempt to paint skin like this very often. Like, ever so often I'll kind of run with it a little bit, but I'll stop. And that's usually the problem with me improving doing that, because my style is so line-heavy and so focused on form and depth of the line work rather than painting. Like, I almost never really do outright painting. That anytime that I do something like skin, where a lot of what makes skin look realistic is like very, very tiny degrees of like variation in tone and light and so forth and so on. It's very difficult to get right. For me, like, a lot of people struggle with how do I draw hands or whatever, kind of stereotypical things like that. For me, the stereotype is like skin tones. I just cannot. It is a nightmare for me. It's something I've always struggled with. I've never been really good at it. If you see, like I mentioned Sakimi before. Sakimi is a good example. There's lots of artists that are exceptional at doing this. Being able to apply skin tone, be able to get realistic textures out of minimal strokes whenever they're working. Very talented people. I've never been good at that particularly. Like I said, I've always been more of a line person. Because, you know, I started out doing, like, drawing with a mechanical pencil on a sheet of paper in high school and college, and that's pretty much what I did exclusively. Usually, you'll find that people develop their final styles later in life from whatever they were doing whenever they were kids. Because that's usually what they end up... That's what they enjoy doing, right? So, inevitably, whatever they end up sort of doing later in life is an extension of what they were doing whenever they were younger. That's one of the reasons why I was trying to do the Scary Lessons comic thing, is because I was trying to get people used to the idea of you need to grow as a person very early in life and experiment with things whenever you're very young, and expose yourself to new things and put yourself out there if you possibly can, and not to worry too much about being insecure and trying to find positive people around you that will support your attempts to grow as a person. Like, those are important things, because the person that you are whenever you are young won't be the person you are whenever you're an adult. And the style that you draw in whenever you're young won't be the style you draw in whenever you're an adult, and so forth and so on. But the path that you start on will determine what paths that you have as options later on. Especially whenever... Like, whatever path that you choose, whether it's some sort of life goal, whether it's, art-related or whatever it happens to be, it should always be something that you actually enjoy doing. Like, it should be something that you find, this is something that I want to do. I enjoy doing this, I want to continue doing whatever it is that I'm doing here. It should always be like that. You should never feel like you're doing something that you detest doing because you have to do it. That's not really a good approach to life, because you only have one life to live. There's no reason to waste it doing things that you think are necessary, because then it's kind of just a wasted life. Why are you even on the planet if your only goal is to just do what's required of you by society or whatever, do bare minimum, and then just die? Who cares? Like, just do something else. So whenever you're developing as a young person, it's important to be able to facilitate your later growth by making sure that you have the options that you have whenever you're younger. So just, grow as a person, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Anyway, what the hell was I even talking about? I started getting sidetracked thinking about the drawing and other things. But anyways, in regards to growing your style, yeah, I've never really, painted that much. But it's something that's important to be able to do. I'm not specifically that good at it. Not very good. I can be okay at it sometimes, but it's not great. But anyways, if you're wondering, well, why did you upload the video? Because it's important to show that sort of process. I mean, the final drawing ends up looking fine, I guess. But as far as my happiness with it, I'm not very happy with it. I actually think, in the end, and I'll mention this later on, I'm sure, I think it would have looked better without the shading, if I just focused more on what I was talking about, my usual style, but again, the purpose of this video is to show experimentation. To show this is what it looks like whenever I'm doing something I'm not comfortable doing, and I'm trying to teach myself how to do it. Specifically with the skin tones. It's probably going to make up the majority of the video, actually. Me going through and trying to figure out, how do I do this? Because that was a... there's certain things that do translate as you gain more and more experience, I understand, you get more depth to something by placing something very dark next to something that's very light. So in the case of doing something like skin tones, you don't want something that's evenly distributed in a lot of cases. You want to apply something like the light part of the skin. Imagine there's a light on the side of our arms, right? This is something I should be covering later when we actually get to that point, but whatever. Imagine a light on the side of our arms. So on that side is, kind of a light skin tone. And then you would think it sort of makes a gradient towards the darker side, right? So it's like this even thing, right? But that's not really how you get something to pop. What you do is you take that light side, and then you put a slightly, actually sort of a much darker area right next to it. And then that is the part that you actually fade into the gradient. And you try to make it so that it looks... It's not too stark. Like, this is the whole problem with doing skin tones. You want it to make it so that it's not too stark, so it's not overwhelming to look at, so it looks natural. But you also want it to sort of push that light side over so that the light is sort of being accentuated and makes it look more impressive. And that doesn't apply to just coloring. It also applies to like line work, negative space versus positive space, and so on. It's something else that you learn whenever you're doing that. Like just then, like I'm doing those little rows down there at the bottom. Did that with the shading there, just having variable thickness to make sure that it looks natural that way. You get the idea. Like it's not as fancy and it's not like it's complicated or anything. It's just sort of a basic thing, but whenever you're actually sitting down drawing it, it can seem a lot more overwhelming if you're not used to it, I guess. So I'll talk about the line work here. Because I was starting to think ahead here to what I wanted to do as far as coloring goes. Because I knew I was recording this for an art gripe. I didn't know what the theme was going to be. Now I do, of course. Disappointment. But I was thinking ahead, I was kind of wondering, what am I going to do with the coloring? Like, is it going to be a single thing? Is it going to be painting? And I thought, well, if it's an art gripe, surely I can't waste too much time having it just be a basic amount of color, and then that's it. And it seems like even the third part of this... I recorded this in 3 batches. I think the total thing took 9 hours, I think. That's usually how much things like this take. And then once I hit like the 6-hour mark, I think, probably, I thought, this image could be finished. I was going to do touch-ups on it either way. But I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to try to make this look a little bit more realistic. I will regret it, and I did. But that's just how it goes. Like even here, I thickened up the line work like I normally do. And this is the point where I kind of made that decision, because I was thinking, well, this is the part where I'm going to pull up my primary and stick that under this, and then work back over it with another bit of line work. And that's going to be what ends up giving the depth to it. And whether or not I would have done hatching or whatever, I don't know. It probably would have been a mistake, but it's probably something I would not be able to resist doing. That's probably what I would have done. But this is pretty much the start of me making that decision, deciding, alright, if I'm going to do this, it's got to be clean. So I've got to make sure that I don't have too much variation, and I've got to get all this other crap going. And I think I may have already tried to fix up the facial features like I was talking about. But either way, I guess I'll actually talk about the game, because most of the stuff I want to talk about is actually going to come in the coloring phase of this. I pre-ordered Fighter Z. Oh, by the way, if you don't know who Android 21 is, Dragon Ball. Oh, this doesn't have anything to do with the Dragon Ball. Wouldn't want to get taken down with Toei again. Android 21's from Fighter Z. She's basically another Cell, except she also includes stuff from Boo, supposedly. And I think even the game makes fun of that by... I think Gohan's trying to figure it out, and he says, well, they can't be using cells from Boo. That doesn't make any sense, because if even a single cell of Boo was left over, then Boo would still be around. Which they don't explain, but they at least reference it, and I took it as being sort of like a wink and a nod from them, Arc System. Basically saying, yeah, we know, who cares, just enjoy it. So, that's what I take it to mean. But she's basically the villain of that game. She starts out as a scientist, and very early on she takes this form. So it's not really a spoiler exactly. And there's other things that happen, it doesn't really matter. I have not played it at all. I have not played the game at all. I installed it. It is installed. But I've been doing Warframe and a little bit of Monster Hunter. I haven't played Monster Hunter since like day 3. I'm not that interested in it, which is kind of sad. I wish I was a little bit more interested in Monster Hunter, but yeah, I'll start playing it again soon, I guess. So, haven't played it, but I have watched all the cutscenes. Like while I was working, I pulled up like all one of those YouTube compilation things, all story-related content or whatever, all optional cutscenes and stuff. So I managed to listen to that and kind of look up and see that while I was going on. So I actually know probably all of the story by now. So I know everything that goes on with her, but I haven't played it. And it should be obvious why I'm not going to play it. I'm sure if I did, people would just get angry at me. It's kind of the running theme. I mentioned this before, but anytime that I want to give feedback on something, I have to very carefully legislate myself as far as what I'm going to say about it. Like, I was trying to watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and it's not a bad show, I guess. But I was going through and watching that, and I thought, I'm not really laughing at any of this. And it's not like, oh, this is a fire, or anything like that. It's just me sitting there, just watching it, and having a neutral response to it. It was not like anything negative, but I wanted to ask on Twitter, like, is this really it? Like, is this the appeal of it? Because some people are like that, where the appeal of the show, like, there are like cringe shows, like people really like watching the cringe, like Woolies like that. Really like watching the cringe factor of things. Thinking about like watching people get uncomfortable and nervous and reacting badly to situations and things like that. And that's definitely not for me. I feel nothing but bad things whenever I watch stuff like that. So I personally find no value in it, for myself. But if someone were to say, oh, I love stuff like that, I get it. Like, I understand. And with the Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing, it was kind of the same thing. I was just wondering, well, is it just this as the series goes on? So I know whether or not it's something that's really going to kind of kick up. Like, does something change in Season 2? Which apparently it sort of does. Danny DeVito comes in. But anyways, of course, the second that I brought that up, is this the only joke? Just that they're bad people? And it kind of is, and a lot of people said, yeah, it is. Just, if you don't enjoy that, you don't enjoy that. Which is completely fair. But of course, the second that I mentioned that, a lot of people were like, oh, here we go. Gonna bitch again. And that's sort of just one of those things that I always have to think about whenever I do anything is, alright, is this too negative? Is it too positive? Can I phrase just a basic, legitimate thought in my head that's rattling around as being something that's rational without people overreacting to it, blah blah blah. And when it comes to fighting games, ooh, boy, is it cranked up to 11 on that. Because fighting games just are not for me. I don't really enjoy them for various reasons. There's all sorts of, like, FGC cultural things where I'm just never, ever, ever going to see eye to eye with people. Like, even there's an attitude in general FGC of we're going to make you better by treating you like dog shit and insulting you, that sort of thing. Like, Wooly even jokes about it, like, if he had to play a child, he would obliterate the child, just absolutely shit all over him. Make sure that he can barely even move, that sort of thing. And that's like a common FGC thing. It's like some sort of bizarre point of pride for them to make sure that other people are not allowed to enjoy the game as new players. It's super bizarre to me. And I'm sure there would be a response of, no, it's not like that, it's like this. I don't get it either way, that's the point. But I'm very... if you're listening to this video, if you watch like the Scary Lessons video especially, I'm very, very much against attitudes like that. And I guess it kind of goes along with this attitude of enjoying cringe things or whatever. And this, by the way, this is sort of cringe, I guess, if you're making that argument. If you're screaming at the comment section, yeah, it is, isn't it? I'm such a hypocrite. You get the idea, though. So is this one of those things I just never see eye to eye with it? Like, I'm just too different of a person. To me, if I was an expert in some game, which I used to be, not so much these days, but back when, of course, when I was younger, I was much better at certain things. I was really good at Guild Wars 1, I'll say that. It's not really an action in the game, though. Man, I love making builds in that game. Anyways, getting off topic. But if I was an expert in the game, usually I would, really might want to make sure that someone doesn't get overwhelmed, that they're always enjoying themselves, make sure that if it's like some sort of PvP thing, then I'm not, like, ruining their experience, that I'm holding back, that I'm making sure that they're able to actually see what's going on, understand what they're doing wrong, get a hang for what the basics are, and so forth and so on. I would never be the kind of person that sets out to, ruin their experience, or to, test them for the community to make sure that they can make it in our hardcore, we have big dicks community thing that the FGC weirdly has going on sometimes. It's like, I still don't know what's up with that. I guess it's just the nature of fighting games. Anyways, point being, whenever I make comments like that, I have to very carefully leverage them. And I can't do that with fighting games, because it seems like no matter what I say, people always get very, very angry about it. Which is really strange. Like, if you would think that the whole point of the attitude in the FGC is, oh, we're giving you a hard time, but we're just kidding. It's super weird that if I give someone a hard time in the FGC, then it's a very serious matter, and they not jokingly, but legitimately get super angry about it. I don't get it. Anyways, I'm sure there's a very complicated explanation going back to the 1970s, back to California. Like there's this long-winded documentary or something. I don't know. Anyways, point being, I know everything about Android 21. She is a lovely character. You can tell she's like a walking can of fetishes. Like whenever she came out, actually, whenever Android 21 first came out, of course, her human form had been revealed, and that was it. I didn't like her at first, until it was mentioned, oh, she's a scientist. And then I thought, oh, okay. Because at first I thought, oh, she's just a fighter, but she's just walking around in a coat with glasses, and... Like, that only, by the way, that only lasted like 1 or 2 minutes, so I wasn't, like, amazed or anything, or despising the character. But the second that I got that extra information and the implication, oh, she used to be Jiro's wife, and so forth and so on, everything started falling into place, and it's like, oh, okay, that information actually makes me like this more. And then whenever this design came out, it was one of those moments of, this is one of my characters. Like, this would be something that I would make over time. Of sitting down thinking, all right, like rubbing my hands together sinisterly, what can I do to ruin people's lives? Like, how many fetishes can I get into one character? And that's basically what she is. They're basically taking every little, like, artist move, like the red sort of naughty, like, demon girl skin tone, the warm, inviting, like, bubblegum fleshy thing going on, the tail, and the white hair, and the red eye. Like, they were dialed in. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had artists working overtime on this, right? And whenever I looked at it, I said, that's something I would do. And that's not like oh, I made this sort of thing, but it's more of it's unusual to see something that is, like, registered for me be made by someone else, I guess. I don't know. I like the character, I guess is what I'm getting at. I generally like the character. This, by the way, this is not this is not me marrying Android 21. The purpose of this image was to basically do my standard, like, creepy... someone referred to it on the subreddit as emotional pornography. And that's sort of what it is. It's basically trying to evoke feelings in people that they don't want to feel, which is sort of the common theme with me. I have to adjust the skin tone of the dude's hand, but I tried to make sure that actually the hand was this sort of weird multi-ethnic hand where you could look at it and go, well, the lighting means he's Caucasian, or the lighting means he's actually a black dude, or he's brown skin, or whatever. And usually, you either had to do like a green hand because anonymous, right? Or you have to do what I did, where it's sort of this weird gray, like it doesn't want to be too brown and it doesn't want to be too white sort of look. Because I want to make sure that whenever someone looks at it, they go, ah, me, because you're a loser. I'm kidding. But that is the general thing. I want to make sure that if you want to project onto it, because that's the joke, right? If you want to project onto it, you can. So that's the reason why I chose the skin tone like that. Anyways, I'm getting really sidetracked here. I wanted to talk about the shading. But if you've been actually watching the shading up until now, this is kind of just standard shading for me. And I wasn't trying to be really aggressive here. And it isn't until it kicks in later on that I actually start going crazy and trying to be more aggressive with it. Because at this point I was like, well, if this is just standard fare for me, I'm not learning anything, I'm not demonstrating anything new. I was kind of getting frustrated with it. And I must have eaten something bad because I had some sort of weird attack of some sort the other night when I was trying to work on this. And I was like in this weird state of like feeling really parched and sort of lightheaded, and like I lost a whole day of sleep for some reason. I picked up something whenever I went into town, not sure what it was. I was sick for some reason. But that contributed to the fact that I was not in a particularly good mood, and I was getting frustrated with the image. Because I thought, I don't like the look of this. Because if I'm pushing for something that's more than just basic plague lines and, line depth, blah, 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 the same stuff I always do. If I was going to do that, then this was not cutting it. And I basically was just in the mood to just push to try to do something different. So we're getting up to the point where I'm just kind of doing standard fare stuff and doing the same shading that I always do, where it's sort of... It's not the binary shading that I sort of used to do. I still like doing binary stuff. Some people were like, oh, thank God he got out of that phase. I still enjoy doing it. It still looks good to me. But I get why people don't really like the sort of that alias versus non-alias look to it. But anyways, this is kind of typical for me, where it's not really that, but it's still very safe. And I sort of had to do that because the shading on the characters, like the Dragon Ball character, the shading on the character is always like that. Even in Fighter Z, it's made to look like the show. So, and here's where I start to get crazy. It's made to look like the show, so as a result, even with their shading, it's meant to look sort of harsh and comic book-like. So whenever I'm replicating this, I'm thinking I can't be realistic, and if I even tried, it would look like shit because I'm not used to doing it. But at the same time, I can't have it just be flat and overly cartoon-looking because that's not what I'm trying to do right now. So it was a very frustrating thing for me. So, anyways, this is the point where I start to get crazy, where I start saying to myself, this might look like shit. I'm recording it. It's going to be documented, but I'm going to give it a try anyways. So I start just applying very, very aggressive, for me anyways, very aggressive, like, dark areas and pulling them into light areas, adding rim lighting everywhere. And basically just... This is something that I do whenever I do get frustrated and I'm trying to grow whenever I'm drawing, whatever. Like, if I'm trying to figure out something, like, and this usually comes up in the case of doing skin tones, because, like right here, this doesn't work at all and I get rid of it. But it's sort of this thing where it's like the equivalent of building a desk from, I don't know, Kinko's or something. Do they even sell it? No, they don't. It's like building a desk or something. A Walmart desk, there you go. And you're like getting really pissed off at it. And eventually you're like, alright, you don't want to fit in this fucking slot? Here, I'll solve this problem. You just start like jamming it in as hard as you fucking can. And then it eventually pops. And it's not clear whether or not that was supposed to happen or not. But you made it happen, right? because you just got pissed off and you're like, this is fucking happening. Like, I'm done with you. And that's what I was doing with this shading. That's how I get whenever I'm trying to learn something. I eventually get frustrated, and like, even for me, like, usually I'm the kind of person that's like, well, take risks, do some things that you're not used to doing. And part of that isn't necessarily just doing, well, today I'm going to do charcoal, or today I'm going to do stippling only. And it's not like crazy experimental things, it's also just stuff like this. Like, even like whenever I'm applying the nose here. That actually came from, I was looking at some other examples of what other artists were doing, and I couldn't replicate it because their stuff was more like overtly realistic, which this can't be. But I noticed, well, a lot of what's bringing it out is the fact that they're so aggressive with the way that they're layering together lights and darks. And with the nose usually is very white, and I don't like adding too much darkness to the nose because it's a focal point and it has kind of that Tumblr nose thing shit that I despise. But I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna fucking do this and we'll see what happens. And it did work. Like, it makes the nose look a little bit more realistic without it being overly realistic, I guess, but it's not quite there. But you get the idea. Like, I was intentionally being as aggressive as I possibly could. So that even if I fucked up, I could look at it and go, well, yeah, but this. You know, it still works for this other reason. So, that's what the rest of this image is mainly going to be. It's me playing, basically. It's me just aggressively playing with the brush and just trying to figure out, well, maybe if I do this, maybe if I do this, this doesn't look good. Like, whenever I was doing this, like, some parts of it look maybe fine. But the problem I have with it is that it makes the skin look really sort of plasticky and almost kind of rubber-like in a way. And it gets lesser as time goes on. But that's probably the thing that I've struggled the most with in regards to doing skin tones. Is that it requires a lot of contrast, like whenever you're doing especially muscle tone and like variations between, like, say, the intersection of the arm with the torso. Usually is an area where you get a lot of shadows going on. But at the same time, like I said before, skin has to be very, very light and very giving visually, so it's not too aggressive. For me, it's an incredibly hard thing to get down. Like, it's very, very difficult to get it to look right. So if I ever tried to do painting or sort of realism, I always fuck it up. I always do. And it never looks the way that I want it to look, and to this day, I still can't quite figure it out. There are people that are just... Of course, part of it is that I'm only spending, like, 9 hours or whatever at most doing this, whereas people that will do, like, an actual painting, like a by hand, like, oil painting or something. Things like that can take upwards of a month sometimes. It just kind of depends. If you work on it, like, 3 hours a day or whatever it happens to be. Certainly, people that do realism don't just bang it out in 2 days and upload it to YouTube, so that's partially my fault. But I've never been the kind of person that wants to dedicate that much time to something in the first place. And here's me trying to fix that plastic look. Where I thought, well, the problem is that there's too much saturation, there's too much contrast going on, but I also don't want to remove too much of the contrast, or else I'm going to lose all the effort that I put into it in the first place. So eventually I just kind of worked it down to this. And even now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, man, that looks really muddy. I really don't like the look of it. But you guys get the idea. Doing this sort of stuff is really difficult. For me, anyways. I'm sure it's difficult for anyone. Usually the people that do these exceptional, like, they look amazing, like realistic paintings or whatever, of characters. Like, there's some that are just fantastic. I can't think of artists off the top of my head. There's lots of individual images that I could upload or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. That you look at them and are like, ooh, that looks really fucking good. And I'm sure that the reason why those look really good is because that's all they do. That is their style. Their entire life, they probably, whenever they were younger, whenever they were kids, wanted to do painting in Photoshop, and they maybe did alterations editing photos, and maybe they did some matte work, where I've done that too. Matte work can be pretty fun, where you take either a photograph or 2 existing illustrations or something, and just put them together when they weren't meant to be. Things like that. And that can lead up to doing more experimental things later on, and can develop into doing outright paintings, stuff like that. So, whenever you're learning stuff like that, a lot of it just comes down to whether or not you're spending a huge amount of time doing it. And for me, of course, that's not my style, so it doesn't really lend itself well to me. So, whenever I say I consider this picture ultimately to be a failure in that respect, it's not because I didn't learn anything, it's because, to me, the image is stuck in between 2 styles. It's stuck between my style. Like, it doesn't have Uncanny Valley, I guess. But there's, like, my style where it's a lot more sort of cartoony. It's sort of semi-realistic. That's always kind of been my problem. Like, I kind of draw sort of realistically in a weird way, but it's not realistic at all. And a lot of it is focused just on proportions with the way the body is shaped, like line thickness, very heavy on line work, which ensures that it can never look realistic. And then you have like actual realism that normally people do, where you can not pick up any line work at all. Like, you look at it and you can't even tell that it's there if it's there at all. And if you're doing realism, you can't have lines. So, to me, the reason why the image sort of fails in that respect is just because it's stuck between those 2 different worlds. It's not cartoony, and it's not realistic. It's just something in between, and it's not clear what it's trying to be. And that's because it was an experimental image. That doesn't mean you can't still enjoy the picture. Like, if it was just garbage beyond any degree of saving it right, then I probably wouldn't have uploaded it in the first place. Or really what I would have done is I probably just would have gotten rid of the shading and just turned it back into a tri-tone picture or something like that, and just been done with it. But, that's ultimately why I can't say that I was too excited about the end result. It still looks fine. Like, as far as skin tones go, I guess it's probably the best example I've ever put out in regards to that, but like I said, I'm still not good at doing it, so if you're like, oh, it looks like shit, like, I'm sure there's like 4chan posts or somewhere like that. That's usually where it is. Usually there's some shithead in 4chan. So, it looks like shit. Like, it's fucking garbage. One of those people. Little insecure kids. And I'm sure that's there. And it's sort of like a legitimate thing, sort of, but not really. But you can see there, briefly, whenever I had the hair set to almost nothing, like sort of on the rim right there, like right now. That's what it's supposed to look like whenever you're painting, but there's not supposed to be any lines there. And developing it to the point where it looks realistic without it looking like a picture that has had its line work taken away. Because what lines are just basically containers. They're insinuations of a parallel between light and dark, so that, you're like drawing a container of a human face or something. Like, here's their head, and you draw a circle. And, like, there aren't circles around people's heads in real life. There's just light, dark, tone, color, and so forth and so on. But in order to get that to work in a binary environment where you just have negative space and positive space, the best way of doing that is just a single line. Because it's amazing, really, if you think about it, it's amazing that the human eye can do that. That we're not wired to see nothing but, realistic things. I guess it comes down to our evolution in terms of being able to register, like, facial expressions and things. So maybe we see that naturally because of that reason. I don't know how to put it. But I assume that's what's actually going on. But yeah, it's amazing that we can do that at all. That you can actually draw like a stick figure or something, or like a little kitty face, like a little nya face, where it's just little curve, dot, and then like a 3 on its side or something. And people are going to look at that and go, oh yeah, cat face. It's amazing that the human eye can do that. It really is. And it's super useful too. Otherwise, I imagine maybe art would have never taken off as far as evolution goes if the human eye wasn't capable of registering things like that. To be able to see things as being visual containers. To be able to recognize faces where there isn't a face, and so on and so forth. It's pretty interesting. So, super useful for me that it works that way. I don't know if I'm ever actually going to get to the point where I'm never going to do realism. But I do get to the point sometimes where I get frustrated because there are things that I want to be a little bit more realistic. Like skin is probably the biggest example for me. Because there's so much appeal to... Like, drawing out the appeal of something like this relies so much on being able to engage with the little subtleties and warmth of the image. And if it was just tritone, or like two-tone, where it's just skin tone and then a very harsh degree of lighting, like I was doing earlier on in the video. If it was only that, then it would not have been as appealing from that perspective. Like it would still look fine, but you wouldn't look at it and go, oh, heart boner, or whatever. I'm super uncomfortable right now. It wouldn't have been that. It would not have worked. So the fact that I can't really get around that problem. I'm still, as an artist, trying to figure out a way to get out of this in-between state that I'm not happy being in. Where I don't want it to be too overly cartoony, but I certainly don't want it to be realistic, and I cannot figure out what to do with it. And usually my solution has been to just do that middle ground where, like earlier I said, I would have stopped here. And it's possible I would have stopped here and just had that been the video and then that's it. That's usually where I end up sort of sitting myself. But I'm not happy sitting in that chair. It's just not very satisfying. And I guess this looks fine to some people. But I'm sure to other people, they look at it and it's like, how come it doesn't look realistic? You know, because a lot of people, especially non-artists, like non-artists very, very much so, tend to think, well, the height of art is Baroque, paintings, where everything is, it looks like a very dramatic photograph. Like it has to be that. So if you have something like this, where it's sort of stuck in this weird in-between state, for a lot of people, that's just not acceptable. So as a result, I don't care about that, but so much as, you're not reaching as many people as you could have otherwise. So, I don't know. But I'm probably ahead of myself. I'm not even really at the skill level where I can even worry about stuff like that. Anyways, final result here. What I really need to do is work more on my form, because there's too many examples of me being inconsistent with what I'm doing, how I'm actually applying myself in that regard. I can be better. I can be better. How I'm gonna get to that point, I could definitely improve on form, but as far as that other step, shading and so forth and so on, I'm not sure. Like I've said before, I did a lot of work in high school, not a lot of work, what am I saying? But I did a lot of drawing in high school, and it was all shit. It was just me, doodling on pieces of paper. And as an artist, I really didn't even get started until my mid to late 20s, so... that's where I started to grow. All the things that I enjoyed whenever I was younger, and all the things that I was capable of doing at that stage in development, is what ended up developing into, this, now. So, I still have lots of room to grow, but I'm a little bit too old to be worrying too much about growing dramatically, so I need to be working on perfecting. So maybe I should pull a Vegeta in Super, and instead of chasing Goku's, instead of chasing the Ultra Instinct of Sakimi-chan or whatever, maybe I should just focus on something else. But I'm not sure what that something else is yet. Super Vegeta. Super Super Vegeta Bluda. So it'd be, in my case, Super Eli, I guess. I'm not sure what Super Eli is yet, though. We'll figure that out one day. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy the image. Let me know what you think. I'm probably being the most critical of anyone, aside from like random 4chan shit posters or whatever. But I'm sure you guys enjoy the image, but enjoy it further. Enjoy the stabbing in your heart that you don't understand, which I hope is the thing that I accomplish more than anything else. Fuck all the shading shit. As long as you feel bad. As long as you feel bad about yourself. That's what I really wanted to do. Yes, yes. Alright, see you guys next time. Bye.